Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am Kristina Lunarodvigia from Seria Novosti. My first question is for Sergey Viktorovich. You have repeatedly commented on the tense situation in Venezuela that has arisen since the beginning of the year. I would like to know how the situation in this country is developing from your point of view. Thank you.
Our position remains unchanged. This position has a fundamental nature. It is based on the principles of respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states, whose governments, of course, represent the interests of the entire population. And Venezuela was exactly such a state. Therefore, our fundamental assessments of the illegal operation carried out by the United States remain in force. They are divided by the vast majority of the states of the world's majority, the countries of the global south, the global east, and only Western Europeans and other allies of Washington are so shamefully trying to avoid fundamental assessments. Although it is clear to everyone that this is a gross violation of international law. In general, this indicates that other actions that we observe in the international arena are not even attempts, but the lines of our American colleagues to break the entire system that has been created for many years with their direct participation, not only in terms of the structure and organization of the daily nations, but also in terms of the principles of the globalizations model that the United States has introduced, appealing to slogans such as the freedom of market forces, fair competition, the inviolability of property, and much, much more. Now, as they say, it has essentially gone under the tail. And instead of globalization, we are witnessing the fragmentation of the world economy. But Venezuela and I have a long history of good strategic relations. We are committed to the agreements that have been reached. And of course, with great interest, concern, and sympathy, we observe how the Venezuelan leadership defends its rights, its independence, while showing flexibility and expressing readiness for dialogue with the United States. This was repeatedly said by the authorized president, Belsa Rodriguez, with the understanding, of course, that such a dialogue will have the form and content based on the principle of equality, mutual respect, and refusal of one-sided methods of dictatorship, either in politics or, moreover, methods of force. I cannot predict how everything will happen next, but at this stage, we see that the Venezuelan leadership defends its national priorities and national sovereignty and the need to participate in international relations precisely as an equal, sovereign, independent state. I really hope that everyone who is interested in relations with Venezuela, including the United States, will respond with mutual respect and will also respect these principles, which, in my opinion, should have a universal nature.
Pavel Tsukhanov, TASS Agency. Sergey Viktorovich, we would like to ask you the following question. Donald Trump announced the introduction of 25% tariffs against all countries cooperating with Iran. How could you comment on these words, and, in your opinion, can they in any way affect the bilateral relations between Moscow and Tehran?
I do not think that any third party can change the fundamental nature of relations between Moscow and Tehran. This character is based on agreements reached between the presidents of the Russian Federation and the Islamic Republic of Iran. It meets the interests of the two states and two peoples. This character is embodied in a whole series of practical projects of a material nature, such as the construction of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, the implementation of plans in the field of transport infrastructure, such as the North-South corridor, and many other issues on the agenda of Russian-Iranian relations, which are of particular importance, including for the development of this entire region, this region of the Eurasian continent. Certainly, when the United States begins to act solely by ignoring all those norms that the Americans themselves promoted, propagating a model they called globalization, and when they themselves afterwards, as I already mentioned, abandoned all their principles. Of course, this suggests that our American colleagues look unreliable when they act in such a manner. And to place a bet on thinking only about how to promote one's interests and use threats and methods of direct pressure in the form of tariffs everywhere where there is oil or some other important strategic natural resources, well, they announced 25% tariffs for Iran's partners. Regarding Russia, there is a senator named Lindsey Graham, who is included in our corresponding lists. He is actively promoting, and has recently clearly become more active with, an initiative for 500% tariffs on trade with all countries that trade with the Russian Federation. This can, of course, cause a smile, it can cause anger or rejection, but I think we simply need to work and implement the agreements that exist between us and the Islamic Republic, between Russia and all our other trade and economic partners. When such a powerful country as the United States acts with such unscrupulous methods of unfair competition, it only indicates that the competitive positions of the United States are consistently deteriorating. But surely, there are some fairer methods of defending one's positions than such direct discriminatory involvement of sanction levers. This cannot continue for long. It will lead to an even more serious crisis in international economic and international political relations. We speak frankly about this in the dialogue we have with Washington, and which we want to continue. We are frankly discussing the need to still bring some elementary order to the methods applied in the international arena.
Sergey Viktorovich, a question for you. Information has appeared in the media that the U.S. President's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, together with Kushner, are going to come to Moscow in the coming days and meet with Vladimir Putin. How can you comment on this? And what does Moscow expect from the new round of consultations on Ukraine? And are there any shifts at all in the negotiations?
President Putin has repeatedly, including over the last couple of weeks at various events, confirmed our position on openness to negotiations on Ukraine. If these negotiations are of a serious nature, and if the persons interested in such negotiations are truly ready for them and have something to say. I will just note in parentheses why I emphasize specifically the seriousness of any initiatives. For example, once again, President Macron stated that he will definitely contact Putin within a few weeks. This is not the first time he has said this. Well, first of all, we are all adults, and even more so when adults hold state posts, and even more so when they want to discuss issues of war and peace. Then one probably just needs to propose the appropriate contacts. But when, like Mr. Macron, someone states, I will be talking, we will have to talk to Putin anyway, and in a few weeks I will propose something there. Well, it's not serious. This is working for the public. Working, I don't even know, microphone diplomacy, megaphone diplomacy, which has never led to anything good. President Putin, on the contrary, is always open to a serious conversation. And all previous meetings with President Trump's special envoy, Mr. Witkoff, and recently Mr. Kushner joined him. All these meetings were serious, concrete, aimed at dealing with the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis and agreeing on ways to overcome these root causes, because otherwise no stable, long-term peace can be expected. And those who are talking now, the Europeans constantly, Germany, the British even more so, that the number one priority is a ceasefire. A ceasefire for 60 days on a permanent basis. This is all, of course, not serious, although we are ready to conduct a conversation even with these representatives. But when they say that everything else besides a ceasefire is secondary, it is clear what we are talking about. We are talking about, once again, bargaining for additional time in order to support the Kiev regime, to preserve its essence. And strictly speaking, all the initiatives that Europe is discussing, including those discussed in Paris, with the participation of Messrs. Witkoff and Kushner, all these initiatives are aimed only at preserving the current Nazi regime in that part of Ukraine, which they hope will remain after a settlement, which obediently carries out the will of the West, primarily the will of Brussels, the EU and NATO Brussels. And this collective Brussels is interested in preparing for war against the Russian Federation. They talk about it openly. This is what our European colleagues want. But from our previous contacts with the United States, starting with the summit in Anchorage and during subsequent contacts through Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner, we see that the United States understands the unreality of such a scenario. They want to suppress any attempts regarding dragging Ukraine into NATO, and they understand perfectly well that without solving the issue related to the fate of those people living in Crimea, Novorossiya, and Donbass, who categorically reject the Kiev regime and therefore express their attitude toward returning to Russia, without solving this issue, nothing will work either. And the Americans understand this. I repeat once again, we are open to contacts with Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner. The President has met, I believe, 6 times with President Trump's special representative. And I am sure that if they show such interest, then this interest will be met with understanding. As for the part of your question about what progress there is in the negotiations, we do not know. If we are talking about the negotiations, I mentioned they remained in Paris, between the coalition of the willing, or whatever it's called, with the participation of Zelensky and with the invitation of Witkoff and Kushner, they released their final document, or rather a declaration of intent, I would say, which the United States did not join. And we do not yet know any specific information about what was actually there and what stands behind this declarative document. So if our American colleagues are interested in briefing us on their impressions, of course, this is of interest to us, especially considering that our contacts with the Americans on Ukraine are based on the solid foundation of Alaska. where an understanding was reached, shared by both the American and Russian sides.